So at 14, my aunt had paid for me and my brother. We were homeschooled, you see. So if that helps you guys understand how I could never get away or talk to anybody, we were homeschooled. So my rich aunt had paid for us to go to a private school when I was in 9th grade at the age of 14. My brother was in 7th grade, so he was 13. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't do schoolwork. You see, when I was homeschooled, my mom was not schooling me. I was schooling myself. My mom had no responsibilities. I was watching and babysitting my younger brother and sister because my mom was in severe depression and would be laid up in bed. She had a job for like maybe a year or two, maybe a year. She worked at the grocery store down here, and it took such a toll on her, the responsibility of having to work and not having any money, that when she was home, she was bedridden. So I would have to take care of 3 younger siblings while doing schoolwork, while teaching my brother's school and grading his schoolwork, and cooking and cleaning and taking care of animals. We lived on a mountain. I would have to chop the wood. I would shovel the driveway. I had all the duties of a man, but was treated like a slave. All of this is ignored by my family, by the way. All of it. So at 14, my aunt had paid for me and my brother to go to a private school that was about 30 minutes away or so. And the reason I mention that is because my mom would have to drive us in her van from her house 15 minutes down into the middle of Front Royal, where the bus stop was, and then the bus would take us from there 15 minutes to school. Well, I was having severe problems in school. I couldn't concentrate. All I wanted to do was socialize, because that was the only socialization I had ever gotten. And that Christian school was extremely strict. That Christian school the children in that Christian school were split 40-40 and then 20. 40 of them were extreme Christian upbringing, pious, little better than thou kids. 40% of them were public school kickouts, like they got kicked out of public school and this was their last chance at a private school. And then the other 20% were just regular kids, I guess. So it was quite a polar opposite kind of school, you know. And of course the kids, outwardly, the kids that were all Christian and everything were attracted to me because I was so rigorous, you know. But I got along and was able to socialize and understand at a deeper level these kids who were abused and came from these public schools. So that's who I was hanging out with when I was at school. Jimmy and Louis Feltz. Jimmy, they were the ones that helped me run away. My mom was so oblivious to me and what was going on with us as children. I was able to sneak 2 big duffel bags one day. I had told Jimmy and Louis, I said, look, I'm being abused at home. I need to get away. They said, oh, sure, man. We'll help you get away, because Jimmy was in my grade, but he was like 16, but he had failed, so he was in 9th grade. And then his brother, Louis, was 18. But, anyways, so I said, guys, I need to get away from home. And of course, they were more than happy. They came from a unbelievable bad childhood, and of course they were like, fuck, dude, let's go, They offered me a place to stay and everything, but I just couldn't, because of my guilt and shame, stay anywhere in this area. I was going to California. So I packed 2 duffel bags that night, and I was able to sneak them onto my mom's van, sneak them out of her van onto the bus, and then go to school with them without her even noticing. That's how oblivious she was, and wrapped up in herself she was. So that evening, instead of taking the bus home from school, jumped in the truck with Jimmy and Lewis. We drove around and were being hoodlums. And I mean, there was a few other kids they picked up, and I mean, it wasn't good. We were being stupid. And then finally that evening, I said, okay, I'm ready to go. I said, just drop me off here. They dropped me off at a gas station. I started walking to Winchester, heading to the bus stop with 2 big duffel bags at 14 years old. Well, needless to say, a couple hours later, I was right there. I saw the bus stop lights, man. I've made it. It was like early in the morning too. I think 2 in the morning. I can't remember. But the cops picked me up and they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Man, I'm going to California." And they laughed, of course. And anyways, they took me back home, and of course, they asked what happened. I said, "Look, man, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to go to California." And that excuse didn't work. So they dropped me back home off at home at 14, and I was right back in the mess. And from then on, I realized there was no hope for me. I was destined to be my mom's slave. I was going to have to live out till I was 18 for the next 4 years. I was going to have to live out under my mom's abusive household the best I could. So I was grounded, of course. Like I said, I was completely grounded for 4 years before I got out at 16. And what I did was I just went along. I did what I had to do. I kept quiet. I refused to talk to anybody about any of my personal things. I couldn't. I kept it inside. I had a hate that would grew and grew and grew for my mom, while at the same time being confused, thinking I was going to hell because of the way I felt about her, being conflicted, not knowing what to think. So I just shut up. I quit. From what I can remember, between the ages of 14 and 16, after I got back, I quit, like, giving my mom a hard time about everything. You know what I mean? About every little thing, and thinking I was going to, I was trying to do what was right. Instead, I just did what I knew my mom was right for her. And so it cut down on the beatings severely. It cut it down on a lot of the hardships I went through severely, but it was still slavery. I was still enslaved. I had gotten a job finally at 16, and I would ride my mountain bike down off the mountain all the way into Front Royal at Taco Bell and work, and then ride my bike back afterwards. And then I would give her a third of my money to help pay the bills, or half my money, whatever it was. And I did that for a few months. And then I had stolen. So I was seeing this girl at Taco Bell, and what I was doing was was buying sleeping pills and crushing them up. Like I said, I was taking care of my siblings. I was cooking dinner. I was doing everything. And I would crush the sleeping pills up in my mom's dinner at night and give them to her. So that way she would fall asleep, and I would sneak out. I would put the van in idle down my driveway, and then sneak out for a couple hours at night, go fuck that girl, and then come back. Well, I was able to do that for, that went on for like maybe 3 weeks, probably 3 weeks, I think. And I didn't know anything about drugs at that time. I had zero, I knew nothing about drugs. So I didn't know that she was getting an immunity to it, and that's why she woke up and wasn't sleeping. So she woke up one night, called the cops, and everything else. And then, yeah, I got in trouble for that. And then after that, I realized, okay, the only, because that was my only chance at freedom at 16 years old, you know. And I realized, oh shit, okay, well that's gone. I'm done. So my aunt had come to visit. My rich aunt had done her, bi-yearly visit, and my cousin, one of my little cousins, baby cousins, I had slipped a note into her purse. Her $1,000. She's a freaking 4-year-old. I slipped a note in her little $500,000 purse, whatever she was carrying, and it was for my aunt. And I told my cousin, I said, make sure you give this to your mom, okay? And she had forgotten, and I waited for like 3 weeks for my aunt, because in that letter I said, Aunt Dee, here's my work schedule, please pick me up after work. I can't be here. I can't deal with this. I'm going to kill myself, whatever I told her. And so 3 weeks later, my aunt still hadn't picked me up. And like I said, I couldn't call from my mom's house because the phone was so highly guarded. So I was able to call from my work, make a collect call to my aunt, I believe is how it worked. Because again, it was long distance back then. So I had to make a collect call, I believe, from work. And I was like, Aunt Dee, did you get my letter? And she's like, what are you talking about? I said, Aunt Dee, I need help. I need you to come get me. It's an emergency. So anyways, my aunt ended up coming like the next day after I got off work or whatever, and it picked me up. And of course, I didn't show up at home after work, and my mom was freaking out. My aunt called her and said, Tina, Richard's here. And he's going to stay here because what he's telling me, things aren't good at home. And the whole time my mom's screaming, I could hear her over the phone screaming at the top of my lungs that she better return me, that she's calling the cops, that the cops are going to get involved, that my aunt's going to be in trouble, that the cops are going to be there to get me right away. And I'm like, my aunt was looking at me because I could hear over the phone, my mom screaming that loud. Again, this goes back to when my mom used to scream when she would play the actress being beaten by my stepdad. She would scream, so that way people knew what was going on, So my aunt's looking at me and she sees the absolute look of horror in my face, like I can't go back, And she hung up the phone with my mom, and my aunt looked at me and she said, Richard, she said, you have one chance. She said, to tell me what is going on, because I refused. I couldn't. It was shame and guilt. I couldn't say anything about any of the abuse I went through to anybody. And she said to me, Richard, you have one chance. She said, your mom is getting ready to call the cops, and there is nothing I can do about it. She said, I need to know what is going on right now. And I looked at her and I said, Aunt Dee, you remember that time when my cousin died? And my mom said that I got in a fight with those guys. And she looked at me and she said, what are you trying to tell me? And I just looked at her and she goes, and she got mad. She got very mad. Because that time I was 14 years old, and my mom had beaten me so badly. I had 2 black eyes, I had puffy cheeks, I had split lips, and other bruises on me. And it had been blamed on, my cousin had died, and I was trying to keep my little sisters and my brother were making too much noise while my mom was on the phone, and I was trying to keep them quiet. And while I was trying to keep them quiet, right before my mom had gotten off, I had yelled at them and said, guys, stop, because I was stressed out. And my mom immediately had hung up the phone, and before I know it, had beaten the living fuck out of me. Well, we had to go to the funeral, obviously. And obviously, all my family, all kinds of people were going to be there, everybody we knew. So she had to come up with a backstory quickly. So she took me in, she went in and told the church whatever she wanted to tell them. Then she took me in there and made me agree to this story that I had gotten jumped. I had to tell all my cousins. See, this is on my stepdad's side. Now, I told you that 13 kids, tons of cousins, all kinds of stuff. So I had to tell all my cousins and everything that I got jumped. Tell everybody I got jumped, and I had to admit to the pastor that I was evil and all this shit. So anyways, I'm just giving that story so that way I can go back to this story. My aunt looked at me and she goes, "What?" She goes, "You didn't get in a fight?" And I said, "No." She said, "That was your mother?" And I remember shaking my head, yes. And she said, "That's not enough, Richard. I need to hear you say it." And I said, "Yes, that was my mother." She called my mom back immediately. My mom was immediately screaming into the phone. And my aunt very calmly but firmly said, "Tina, the game is up. I know." And my mom, slowly, her voice started getting quieter, and my aunt goes, "Tina, the game is up. I know." And my mom went dead silent. You could hear crickets. And my aunt goes, "We aren't going to have any more problems, are we, Tina?" And my mom goes, "What? And she goes, "Tina, I know. We aren't going to have any more problems, are we?" That was it. And I was able to get away finally at 16.